Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I was so sure I knew exactly what was going to happen with Ohio State in the college football playoff. And it was like one of those like really hacky TV shows where it's like everything goes fine right up until the last minute and all of a sudden it's like shocking twist and then the credits start. Like what just happened? Like I'm watching, okay, Clemson's 2 just as we thought, okay, Ohio State's 3 just as we thought, okay. Alabama will obviously choose the Sugar Bowl since it's closer to home, so Ohio State will be playing in Arlington in the quote unquote Rose Bowl. Okay, just as we thought. Okay, start talking to my son and just go to out of the just like in the back of my head, I just hear Reese Davis say something about Alabama and the Rose Bowl. I was like, back that up. What did he just say? And Tony, we get to go to New Orleans instead of Arlington. Are you excited?
I mean, I've never been to New Orleans, so in a normal year, I would be thrilled. I don't know what to expect from a New Orleans during a pandemic, and really, as we've talked about many times on the show, bowl trips are pretty fun, or have the potential to be fun. And selfishly, that's going to be a little bit muted. But how teams have to make their own energy this year.
Mm-hmm.
The media might have to make their own fun this year, while also trying to get some work done. Blah blah blah. Who cares? But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's and I guess we should say Ohio State versus Clemson in the playoffs in the Sugar Bowl, Alabama versus Notre Dame in the Rose Bowl in Arlington. In case you guys missed it. So yes, Tom, New Orleans. Have you ever been?
I have. I have actually seen a game in the Superdome. I covered in 2007. I covered an LSU Tulane game at the Superdome, and it was one of the worst halves of football I have ever watched. It was that was a Matt Forte Tulane team.
Mm-hmm.
So it's as far as Tulane teams go, it was like they're okay. And I think it was 9-7 at halftime or something like that. And then LSU ended up pulling away and winning. And it was like I walked out of that stadium like, oh, this LSU team is going nowhere. And then, whatever, 3 months later, they win the national championship on that very same field. So, nothing was learned. It's fine. And you know what? I'm not going to count too many strikes against myself for not being able to successfully predict a college football outcome in the year 2007, which is literally the craziest, most unpredictable college football season in the last 20 years outside of maybe this one.
Yeah, you wonder. Yeah, I still think 2007 is crazier because in the end, we get Ohio State, Notre Dame, or Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama in the playoffs, just as everybody predicted at the outset of the season. And I had the story pre-written. Ohio State, Clemson, 2-3 or 3-2 in the Rose Bowl, and then before I published it, and like, you know what? Let me just take out the Rose Bowl and take out the Sugar Bowl because they won't release that until later, even though everybody knows it's going to be Ohio State and Clemson in the Rose Bowl. And so I smartly took that stuff out and then published it without the bowl games. And then, like you, I was, looking at my computer and Reese Davis says, Rose Bowl, Alabama, the Rose Bowl. And you just like look up like, what? And I was going to rewind, but it's like, no, he said that. And then, you look at Twitter and the entire timeline of the people we follow. It's just like everybody's tweeting the same thing, like New Orleans question mark, New Orleans question mark. And because, in all of the planning of this, in terms of, when you look ahead for what games will Ohio State be going to, and you plan for that, them going to New Orleans is about a 5% chance. And the Rose Bowl is like 95% chance when you look at the two venues. Because why on earth would Alabama decide, you know what, let's go out to Pasadena. And then, yesterday, I guess that gets squashed. And then it's like, Alabama and Texas. And you're like, but I thought, why, I don't know why they wouldn't take sugar. It's closer. There will be fans.
The reason they gave was that the Rose Bowl, now that the Rose Bowl is going to be in Texas, Texas is a little bit more YOLO about all of this stuff than pretty much anywhere else.
Okay.
So the Sugar Bowl will be allowed to have about approximately 3,000 fans. The Rose Bowl will be able to have 16,000 fans. So it's an opportunity for more Alabama fans to go travel to the game. So that was, I guess, the deciding factor. And I mean, New Orleans is close, but Alabama has played in both of those stadiums semi recently. So, teams always like to have the familiarity factor where, oh, we've been here before. We know where the locker room is. It's, a bunch of our guys can tell the younger guys what the stadium's like and all that. And Ohio State would have had that in Arlington. They have not played in New Orleans since, when was the last time they played in New Orleans? Was it the Arkansas Sugar Bowl that never happened? Was that the last time they were down there?
Yes. Yeah,
I think so. So yeah, no overlap there, but I'm sure Ohio State will be perfectly happy to go to New Orleans instead. And if there are 3,000 people in there, that's going to feel like an electric atmosphere after Ohio State has been playing in front of, I wonder a little bit about the atmosphere there, because Clemson has been able to play in front of, I think, some bigger crowds than that. Ohio State has been in front of like half of that, has been the most. And the what was the announced attendance at the Big Ten championship game?
Well, they said
1,500 something.
Well, then they doubled it to like 3,100, but that was
3,100. Okay,
I don't know that there's that many people there. I think that math is off because it was just families and media.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I felt like there were more families there than there were typically for Ohio State games this season.
They were spread out pretty far too. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, whatever. Like that's 3,000 people for Ohio State is going to feel. That's not going to feel like a non-event for Ohio State like it might for Clemson if they've been playing in front of bigger crowds this year.
It will be interesting to see what those tickets are, but I think Ohio State would gladly play Clemson anywhere. The Coffee Road Fields on campus, wherever you want to go, the Buckeyes will play Clemson. We'll see at what strength they are. I don't know that this is the best Ohio State team to. Like last year's team would have been a better team in the playoffs than this year's team, in my opinion, just based on all of the question marks that this year's team has. But doesn't mean they're not going to, they wouldn't turn it down like other teams are turning down the bowl game. Mm-hmm. No, you know what? We don't think we have a chance to win, but Ryan Day said he'll take this team in a one-game situation against anybody. And if that one game is Clemson, they're sure going to swing away. And if Ohio State keeps running the ball like this, then that will be an interesting watch for sure. I know a bunch of people are asking about Justin Fields' thumb. Nothing new there. Although, Tom, he was reported to be changing a flat tire at the Woody this morning by ESPN. And if you're able to change a flat tire, you got to think his thumb is pretty good because you're using your thumbs, both thumbs, doing that kind of stuff when you get the tire iron and you're pushing it and then you get your foot on it and then you're doing all this stuff, jacking of the tire and the car. So that's a pretty good sign because you're going to use your dominant hand when you're changing a tire and, Tom, your dominant thumb.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as far as omens go, I guess that's not a terrible one unless you want to read into the Justin Fields got a flat tire on the way to college football playoff, in which case you want to read that as a very negative omen. Sure, you can do that too. Yeah, I mean, he's not in a cast. He's not in a, I don't know that they've gotten a diagnosis back on him yet. I think they're going to kind of look at it more today once they got back to Columbus. But my assumption is if it is a sprained thumb, which is what he said it was, and it's not something more involved in that, like a ligament issue or something like that, that's something that generally, I mean, I don't know if you've ever sprained your thumb before, but it's like they put you in a little bit of a cast and like a little brace kind of thing for like a week, and then it's like, yeah, then that's fine. You feel better. Yeah, he may just kind of take the next week and just rest it and ice it and take it easy and get some anti-inflammatories and all that kind of stuff and just make sure it's rested and as recovered as possible before they start throwing him back out there. So. You would obviously love to have a month in between your final game and the bowl game like you do during a normal year, but 11 days, everything's been a little different this year. We're all just learning to make do.
Get used to it because that's what's going to happen when it's an 8-team playoff. It's going to be like a 12 or 13-day turnaround. At least you'll get it on campus. This is my what I foresee happening when the first round is on campus. The 17 and the 21 to 17 day thing, the COVID rule sounds like that is going from 21 to 17 days. And people are saying, well, why 17 days? Why not 10? Our assumption, Tom, is that they are reflecting the 10-day, but just keeping on their 7-day acclimatization period and heart monitoring. So yes, the Big Ten has reportedly acquiesced, but they're still going to do their 7 days. The SEC does 4 days. The ACC and the Big 12 are like, what's COVID?
and that's so if you backdate it, 17 days from the semifinal would be anyone who tested positive Monday or Tuesday last week would be okay. Anyone who tested positive after that would potentially still be out for the semifinal. So Ryan Day said that they would be getting, I don't remember if he said a bunch of guys or several guys back, but not everyone. So as long as no one else tests positive, they're going to have more people than they did for the Big Ten championship game, which is good. They would obviously love to get, there are certain guys on that list that I'm sure they would really, 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 really love to have back for the semifinal. Chris Olave would sure help that offense. Baron Browning, boy, they would really love to have Baron Browning in there in terms of helping out on that defensive side of the ball. But whoever they get back, that's better, because if it was a 21-day rule, anyone who tested positive last week would have automatically been out. That would have been both of those guys. So it'll help. It's better than it was 2 hours ago for Ohio State. So that's a positive. I went back and looked at some of Notre Dame's games this season, how many people had been there. They had 5,000 people at the ACC championship game, 11,000 people at the game at Notre Dame earlier this year, and 17,000 in their last home game against Pittsburgh. So wow. This will be a much smaller crowd than they have been playing in front of. It was 5,000 people at the ACC championship game. They did not seem to have a lot of issue getting motivated and fired up yesterday against Notre Dame in the ACC championship game. So maybe this ends up being a non-issue, but that's just, there are 100,000 angles to this game, and I'm sure we will spend the next week and a half talking about every single one of them in great detail, but that's one to keep in mind.
And real quick, back to Olave, based on when we heard about it, I would expect him back under that 17-day thing. So he should be good to go against Clemson, provided he's feeling up to it. Tom, Alabama, Notre Dame, we could talk about it a little bit. I want to spend some time here about the difficulty of just this year overall and everything that everybody has gone through, and none of it has been easy. And then to see Jimbo Fisher and Texas A&M be left out. No, please, Tom. It hurts your heart to see a team that has played so many games and won nearly all of them, and hasn't done it in a fancy blow them out kind of way. It's done it with just class, very accommodating the way they have done it. They don't embarrass their opponents. They don't say, look at me, we're Texas A&M. No, they just like, you know what? We're two teams. We're playing a game. Let's have just a friendly competition. And then because of that, because of the Texas A&M Aggie class, the committee, it looks at them and says, you know what? You didn't do it fancy enough. But Tom, these are Texans. They wear their cowboy boots and they wear their chaps and they have their lassos. That's not fancy. That's just workmen. And that's what they are. And they were nearly undefeated. They beat good teams once. They beat bad teams most of the time. And to see them just totally ignored, and poor Jimbo Fisher, who has been quiet this entire time, expecting the right things to be done. And Tom, they were not done. And that guy, you just feel terrible for him.
You do feel bad for Jimbo. This is always a difficult time of year, because it's like, well, what would happen if this team got a chance to play this other team? And it's like, we'll never know what would happen if Texas A&M got a chance to play Alabama.
Right.
Would they lose? I don't know. Let's hypothetically throw something out there. Would they lose by 4 touchdowns? I don't know. We will never get the opportunity to see that. And, yes, technically they did lose by 4 touchdowns earlier this year, but that game was at Bryant-Denny Stadium. So you take away the 3 points from home field advantage, maybe they only lose by 25 this time. Anything could happen. And they should be shown a lot of respect. They ran through an SEC schedule. They beat a winless Vanderbilt team by 5 points. That's almost a touchdown. They won at Mississippi State, which is something that only pretty much everyone else managed to do this year. Beat them by 2 whole touchdowns. Beat Arkansas, who was maybe almost 500, by 11 points. That's more than 10, in case you're not familiar with math, sir. Didn't want to make you take your socks off to do that one. At South Carolina, won that team, beat that team 48-3. South Carolina was so good that they fired the coach this year. That's how good they were. LSU beat LSU 20-7. Again, very quality win. Just a year ago, they won the national championship. What did they do this year? They're defending national champions.
And they beat Florida.
They beat Florida. Yep. I mean, anytime you can beat a 3-loss team by 3 points at home, I mean, that's the kind of thing you got to hang you hang your whole resume right on that one. Beat one at Auburn, again, another team that was so good this year that it fired its coach. And then they beat Tennessee, who is a team that is so good that it probably would have fired its coach if it had the money to fire its coach. I mean, that is a murderer's row. I mean, show them some respect. I mean, they played 2 ranked teams this year and beat one of them that had 3 losses. I mean, I would like you to show me another team in the country that has had to play 2 ranked teams this year, sir. Put some respect on Jimbo's name.
Exactly. And people are just throwing them around like, you know, they don't care. And it you hurt for them. And, you know, fine, Notre Dame. But the thing is, Tom, we've already seen Clemson beat Notre Dame. We know how that's going to go. And it's too bad that there won't be any mystery in the playoffs this year because we won't get to see Texas A&M in there. Beyond the rankings, because poor Cincinnati will never, until the playoffs get expanded, there's the committee looks at the group of 5 teams like they just stepped in something. Like, I've got Memphis on my shoes. Get it off. and so there's never going to be anything there for them, and there's nothing they can do. Maybe if Cincinnati goes undefeated again, but then it just depends on what other programs do. Whereas anybody in the Power 5 could go undefeated, and it does not matter what anybody else does. Those guys are in. And for Cincinnati, it would be like, well, yeah, they're undefeated, but Alabama's undefeated. Notre Dame, Clemson only has 1 loss, and they avenged it. Ohio State is undefeated, and they look for ways to keep these teams out, and so that will be the way it is until they change it. Tom, do you think the committee got it right this year?
I mean, as far as the top 4 teams, fine, whatever. This is a year when there are very clearly there's kind of a top 1, and then there's a 2 and a 3, and then it's just like, yeah, I mean, you could put, if Notre Dame and Oklahoma and Cincinnati and Texas A&M and Iowa State and Florida, maybe Georgia, Indiana, put them in a league. Like, I think a lot of those teams are going 500. Like, it's just, you look at the, I mean, there was like a BCS rankings, like sort of like pseudo BCS rankings that came out earlier in the morning, and it's like Alabama's at like a 1.0, Ohio State and Clemson are right there 2 and 3 at a 0.92 and a 0.93, and then there's like a drop off of like down to like 0.82 or 0.83 down to like Texas A&M and Notre Dame, and they're virtually indistinguishable. And it's just, Alabama's very good. I don't think anyone is going to question that Alabama should be the number 1 overall seed this year. Clemson's very good. I think Clemson is a team that is going to give Ohio State a very, very, very good challenge. They're favored by almost a touchdown already. I think it was 6.5 is where that line opened. And, Ohio State is one of the most talented teams in the country. And how close to full strength will Ohio State be? How much of a handicap will it be for them that they've only played 6 games this year as opposed to having kind of a full season? That has gotten discussed as if it's going to be like this huge advantage for Ohio State. Like, oh, they only had to play 6 games. Like, no, Ohio State would absolutely love to have had another 3 games on their schedule, get a little bit more, get everyone more run, get everyone more experience. And I mean, we talked about Olave being out. We talked about Baron Browning being out, but I mean, things were a little bleak at safety on Saturday in Indianapolis. It got pretty thin in that defensive backfield pretty quickly. And how many of those guys are going to be back for the semifinals? Because I think a lot of those guys were not COVID issues. I mean, Marcus Hooker was there. He was not anyone we had heard about COVID. He was a game time decision. So that was clearly not a COVID thing. But you gotta be getting some of those guys back too. So yeah, this is not a game I'm necessarily going to be picking Ohio State to win. I think it has a chance to be a pretty competitive game, pretty close game, and they absolutely have a chance to win. This is not like Notre Dame does not have a chance against Alabama. Notre Dame is going to lose by 4 touchdowns. The Clemson Ohio State game should be much more competitive, and there is a way Ohio State wins. Justin Fields has to play better than he did on Saturday. They need to get some players back. All of that will help, but this is going to be the more interesting of the two college football playoff semifinals, probably by a relatively wide margin.
And if Trey Sermon rushes for 300 again, I like Ohio State's chances of scoring at least another 22 points.
Yeah. I'm going to go one better than you right there. If Trey Sermon rushes for 250 yards, Ohio State scores at least 24 points.
Okay, so we're talking like 10 yards a point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something like that. That's probably about right. At least 10 yards a point is where I'm gonna. That's as far as I go though. Yeah.
I do wonder what would have happened if Florida had not lost to LSU. Would the committee have been like, "Oh my gosh, Florida is so shiny," and then it would be like, "Oh, so you're gonna put them at number 4?" And we just saw Alabama and Florida, and we don't need that game because we just watched it.
I think honestly, if they had not lost to LSU, I think they probably get in off of the SEC championship game. And in the interest of full disclosure, we turned the radio off in the car when it was 28-10 or something right before halftime, and I didn't bother turning the game on again because I was like, well, I know what's happening here. Like that's, and then I looked this morning and it was like, whoa, the final score was what? If that's a very easy narrative to sell, and I think they were very clearly looking for a reason after dropping Florida one spot last week. They were very clearly looking for a reason to put Florida in over Texas A&M, over whoever that second team in the ACC was. And so I think you probably lose Notre Dame and you add Florida back in, and at that point, do they reseed things so there's not an Alabama Florida opening round thing? I mean,
and honestly,
yeah,
I think Florida is better than Notre Dame. But
I am trying to separate this year's Notre Dame team from every other Notre Dame team,
it's
but
hard.
It's real hard because exactly all of the same issues that always creep up for Notre Dame this time of year, surprise, are creeping up for Notre Dame this time of year. They have not actually, every year it's, oh, no, friend. This Notre Dame team is different. You don't understand. This Notre Dame team, they're so good in the trenches. The skill talent isn't quite there, but they're so good in the trenches. And then they go play Clemson when Clemson's full strength. And guess what? They get their heads caved in the trenches again, because this is what happens every single time. Whoever the ESPN reporter who was at Notre Dame on Sunday during the selection show said, they just had a bad night. They just had just one bad night. It's like, okay, literally every BCS bowl game, New Year's Six bowl game, college football playoff game, and now ACC championship game since 1994 has been the same story. Oh, well, they just weren't quite good enough in the trenches, and the skill position talent just wasn't quite there. Surprise. Okay, well, guess what's going to happen against Alabama? I bet their skill position talent's going to get way better. And Alabama is not the type of team that likes to prove a point in the semifinals, so it should be fine. It'll be fine.
It'll be fine. Speaking of Alabama, Reese Davis, an Alabama alum, was asking Gary Barta was on the ESPN show, and Reese Davis was like, why Ohio State at 3? He's like, first, we'll get to Notre Dame, Texas A&M, but first, why Ohio State, like even in the playoff? And Barta was like, well, they are undefeated. They are a conference champ. They look good all year. And the committee always felt like they are one of the 4 best teams. And then Davis is basically like, but aren't you afraid that this might start changing the way teams schedule down the road? And so, Tom, I have the same concern. Do you think that based on Ohio State going 6-0 in the playoffs, are we going to see a rush of teams down the road? Because just scheduling 6 games a year. And if that is the case, I am with Reese Davis. I think this is a very, very slippery slope for college football. I do not like this move where somebody, a school like, say, Clemson is going to look at Ohio State and going 6-0 and be like, you know what? Let's just schedule 6 games ourselves. And Tom, I do not like this trend. In order to keep this trend from happening, I would have been okay with Ohio State missing out because I don't want people following suit by just scheduling 6 games a year. Do you think Reese Davis has a point?
Not only does Reese Davis has a point, I think they need to change the criteria for the college football playoff committee to the only thing that matters is how many games did you play. I think they need to start making college football schedule like Major League Baseball schedules, 162 games a year. Do you want in or not? I think that's what other possible thing could there be? What other possible argument could there be? That's the logical endpoint. Let's make it happen. Player safety. Look, the Big Ten has already shown it doesn't care about player safety by changing a rule into just solely in favor of Ohio State to make it only slightly more restrictive than the other conferences who are also in the playoff. So very clearly the Big Ten doesn't care about this. So they're just going to, a year from now when Ohio State's, 152-9, and I'm sure that all of the, Tony Barnhart is going to be arguing, well, I mean, yes, they have 9 losses, but I mean, 152 wins. You can't let in an 11-1 team over a team that's 152-9. I mean, that's crazy.
As we know, no committee has ever put in a 9-loss team, and I don't want to see it now.
It really devalues the regular season.
It totally does. I mean, you can lose 9 games, and next thing you know, Michigan's going to be getting in. That won't happen.
So you're saying a 15-game season for them then?
That'd be a nice season, Tom.
Would be.
So that's the playoffs. I'm looking forward to it. We will talk to Ryan Day at 4:00 today, as it'll be Day and Dabo doing their respective Zooms, and I'm sure Dabo, Tom, I believe before he was scheduled to play Ohio State, he was very critical of a team playing 6 games and making the playoffs. I'm wondering if that has changed at all, and has his tune turned a little bit in terms of respecting what Ohio State has done, at least by what he's saying of late. Do you know if that's the case?
Yes. It turns out as soon as Ohio State was no longer a college football playoff contender, it was in fact a college football playoff team. All of a sudden, Ohio State was now an extremely worthy team. Absolutely one of the best teams in the nation, clearly deserving of the spot that they received. Charlatan is a strong word to use. He strikes you as disingenuous in a consistently opportunistic manner. Let's put it that way. And Ohio State fans are obviously big fans of Dabo Swinney's work. So I'm sure they're going to enjoy another week and a half of Dabo Swinney constantly in their news feeds talking about their team. I'm sure that'll be great. Everyone's going to handle that very well. It'll be fun. There's a certain amount of this that's just, it's so performative going into the college football playoff, where it's just like everyone acts like, you would have to be the dumbest person alive to not see things this exact way. And then next year when when their case is different, it's like, well, yes, they played more games, but did they win by more points? What was their margin of victory? What was their game control? And then, 2 years later, it's like, well, you have to look at the quality wins. How many top 25 wins did they have? And then the year after that, it's like, well, yes, they had more top 25 wins, but their loss was so much worse. It's just, everyone has their own little angle to it, and it's all kind of a huge pile of crap. And I do appreciate Ryan Day's approach to it, which is like, Ryan Day is not talking down anyone else. Ryan Day is not saying, yeah, but who the heck has Texas A&M beaten in the last 3 months? Like,
I hope he does that today.
Oh man, just absolutely drag Jimbo. Oh, that would be fantastic. Yeah. My suspicion is that will not be how he approaches that, because that is very consistently not
just
been
wait till
how
I
he's
ask.
approached things. Yeah.
Coach, what do you think about Texas A&M? They ain't played nobody, right?
Who strikes you as the bigger phony, Dabo or Jimbo? Thanks. I'll hang up and listen.
One.
You have to. No. You have to pick one. Don't tell me that neither of them is a phony. Yeah. No. I do think. That's it makes you look like less of a phony if you're not coming out there and lobbying like real hard for your team. That's. You go back through it at some point, like every year, I think I should go back and just like put together, here's all the different arguments that Nick Saban has made or yes. Dabo has made or Brian Kelly has made where this is just all contradictory stuff. Mm-hmm. And, go back through like, oh, here the committee put in this team this year because of this, but this team this year because of this. And it's like, none of it makes sense. It's all subjective. This process is terrible. This process encourages people to be idiots. So yeah, I'm to the point where it's like, all right, can we just bring back the BCS where it's just an objective thing and, everyone knows in advance, like you're going to be rewarded for winning big games, but you're going to be punished for losing. But, and margin of victory either does or doesn't matter depending on the year and how they're quote unquote fixing the BCS formula next year. But it would be, I think I'm to the point where it's like, all right, I'm tired of people and, 13 people sitting in a room and arguing with each other and, just pulling out whatever they want to pull out and then, coming up with ridiculous explanations to retcon it. So yeah, if you went back and you told me, 7 years ago, like, okay, in 2020, there's going to be a global pandemic. And also you're going to be saying, I wish the BCS was back. I'd be like, whoa. You want the BCS back? What?
I agree with you. I'm getting a little tired of the contradictions from the committee. That's why, Tom, it is time to go to 8 teams, Power 5 conference champions. I don't care if one of them is 7-5 or 8-5 after the conference. It basically turns. And so the plan is 5 conference champions, a top 16 group of 5 team, 2 at-larges. And it basically turns like an 18 playoff into like a 13 game playoff because the conference championship games are essentially playoffs. And no, it doesn't devalue the season, Tom. It keeps the season alive for more teams. And when people say things get devalued, devaluing is when a team loses one game in the season opener and their season is over. Mm-hmm. That devalues that regular season. You're only looking at it, not you, but like the Ohio State fans are looking at it from the perspective of Ohio State, where that's all they see. And there's losses going on all around them, and those seasons are now over, but they could be continued if those teams would just win the conference title. And then the stakes are higher. And then you got, Georgia getting in at large, and then Notre Dame. And every year, then the only 2 teams are that are guaranteed are just Georgia and Notre Dame with the at large bids, because the committee will get to, I guess, choose 2 teams.
I would really like an exclusion there where no conference can get 2 at-large bids.
Right.
Because
yes,
like we've already seen the SEC West schedule played out. Like we don't need to see Alabama and Auburn and Texas A&M and like no, because you've seen. We're all familiar with the cycle where everyone starts out ranked really high because they're good. And then when they go through the season, oh, look at how many ranked teams they've played. And at the end of the season, they have, their resume is so much stronger than everyone else. And then the bowl games happen and either the SEC team wins. And then, look at the bowl results. It's so clear. Or at the end of the season, the SEC teams lose. And then, they weren't in contention for the national championship. That's all anyone in the SEC is playing for. It doesn't count. And then lather, rinse, repeat. Next year starts again. And the cycle begins anew. So, yeah, I don't really need to see 3 SEC teams in there every year. I'd be perfectly happy with that because there are a certain, you talk about devaluing the regular season, and in connection with the national championship, there are 65, 66 Power 5 teams, which means there's basically 65 or so non-Power 5 teams. Those 65 non-Power 5 teams have a functionally 0.0% chance of playing for the national championship. Their season is already over before the start of the season right now under the existing system. At least if there's a non-Power 5 team in there, at least there's a plausible path to the national championship. I at one point thought maybe it's a 16 team playoff and all of the conference champions get in. And then you have whatever, five at large bids. And, that makes it a little more like the NCAA tournament. And then you probably get a bunch of first round games where it's Alabama 72, whoever won Charlotte or whoever won CUSA that year, 13. But I mean, that gives everyone an even more plausible path. I think eight's probably a perfectly fine number. It's, how often is the champion going to come from outside of the top four? Virtually never, I would guess. But it would be nice to see. Like, there's only one way for us to find out. To let the other teams in every once in a while. This would have been a perfect opportunity for the committee to let Cincinnati in. Unbeaten, conference champion, had some good wins. There was no clear number 4 team. Like, Notre Dame was fine. Texas A&M was fine. Oklahoma was number 6 for some reason. I don't know. Like, what? Their wildly impressive 6-point win, that was enough to leap them multiple spots. I mean, okay. This was such an easy year for the committee to put Cincinnati in. And then, yes, guess what happens? Cincinnati loses 63-14 to Alabama. Guess what's going to happen in Notre Dame? They're going to lose 63-21 to Alabama. Like, I mean, okay, great. That's wonderful. But they have functionally just shown like there's no path for a Power 5 team, a non-Power 5 team to get in. So at that point, like this is no longer a system. This is just, this is just a joke.
It's an invitational. Just going through the preseason AP rankings, Alabama was 3, looking at the SEC teams. Georgia was 4. LSU was 6 with a first place vote. The Gators were 8. Auburn, number 11. Texas A&M, number 13. Tennessee, number 25. Kentucky was even receiving more votes than Indiana. Mississippi State was receiving votes. And, of course, they, we know they beat that LSU team and jumped way up. And then, of course, reality set back in. Northwestern, Tom, one vote in the preseason poll. But, yeah, I basing anything off of what people thought about the SEC in the beginning is it's dangerous, because then anything that just the confirmation bias, I don't need it. I don't need it in college football. And if we can get away from it and take as much power out of the hands of the committee as possible, while still having them involved, that's fine. I think it would be good to see more things decided on the field and include more teams in that, and especially the group of 5, which gets no shot. And apparently they're never going to go do their own thing. So may as well let them try to do this thing. And then, you feed them to the number 1 seed. The number 8 seed gets, the number 1 seed gets the group of 5, number 8. And it's almost effectively a bye if things are that bad. But yeah, I think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, and you look at the NCAA tournament, and not that the NCAA tournament does a great job of determining who the best team is. It's an exciting event, but it really does a terrible job determining who the best team in the country is in a lot of years. Mm-hmm. But I mean, there is no complaint from the SWAC champion that they didn't get a chance. Like, yeah, you're the 16 team. Now, we can have an argument about the play-in games in Dayton and whether those should really exist, because I would argue no, just leave out the crappy Power 5 conference teams that are the 11 seeds normally. Like, I always think of Virginia Tech in this case. It was just like every year Virginia Tech was the team on the bubble, and every year Seth Greenberg would be crying about how they got screwed. And it's like, you're 6-12 in the league. Like, what? Win more games if you want to get in. Like, I have no sympathy at all for that argument or the whole idea of playing games. That is a function of coaches want more games so they can say, we made the NCAA tournament, and they can get their contracts renewed. That's literally the extent of it. That's it. So that you don't have to, this does not need to be a 64 or 68 team playoff. But if there is at least a plausible path for every team in the country to at least have a chance to play in the playoff, like, that would be great. That would be ideal. And it does feel like that's coming. I don't know when. Well, I think when is the next 6-year cycle up of these? Does it
coincide with the TV, like 2023 or something like that?
2023 is a number I had in my head. I think it is 2023, because that would be it started in 2014. Yeah, maybe 2023 is when that would be the 9-year mark. So yeah, I mean,
2024 being the first year.
Yeah, it's coming up. So yeah, I mean, I think you're going to see you'll see an 8-team playoff before the end of the decade, and it's entirely possible that cuts the bowls out, which would not be the worst thing either. Like, not have people have to travel to multiple multiple bowl sites every year. Like, you can play these games in Ohio Stadium, you can play these games in Bryant-Denny Stadium, you can play these games in the Swamp, you can play these games in the Coliseum in California. I would much rather go see a game, Ohio State playing at Florida in the Swamp, or Florida coming up to play Ohio State in Ohio Stadium, rather than going out to the Fiesta Bowl or the Cotton Bowl or whatever. Again, like, there's a limited function for bowl games at this point, and playing a home game is probably going to create a much more exciting atmosphere.
Plus, you should be rewarded for having a better season.
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly.
Anything else, Tom, before we get out of here? Anything you want to touch on?
I mean, there's a million things we can talk about, but I have a feeling we're going to talk a few more times before we, at least before Christmas, and then a few more times after Christmas, and then a few more times before we go down to New Orleans, and a few more times after we're in New Orleans. So yes, I think we're probably okay for today. We will have a very busy week on BuckeyeScoop.com. Lots and lots of fun stuff to talk about. We are we started having we kind of had a plan for having to go to Dallas bowl game. Okay, now what are we going to do for New Orleans? So we may make that a drive instead of a fly, and make some fun stops on the way down and get some fun content on the way down there. A lot of interesting stuff. And I mean, the nice thing about Clemson is we know some folks on the Clemson beat. I'll have our buddy Matt Connolly, probably from the state newspaper, who's a fantastic Clemson beat writer. You should follow him. I put a recommendation in for that yesterday, actually, already on Twitter. Please follow him. Please be nice, though. He's a friend of ours. Yes. We like him. Do not get angry at him. He's a good dude. But we'll have a lot of fun stuff. I mean, this is when you know people on opposing beats, you can have like real good, honest conversations, and get some good information there. And so I think that's going to be a lot of fun. But it is, holy smokes, has it been a week at BuckeyeScoop.com? We had early signing day, had the Big Ten championship game, now Selection Sunday, have a new board, whole new website. Like, yeah. If you have not checked out the site, the new site is delightful. They're still tweaking a few things because we've only been on there for a couple days, but the feedback on the new message board has been like unbelievable, like unbelievably positive. Tons of great new functionality, and man, it is. I don't know how many posts were on the game thread yesterday, but it was, I think, north of 2,000 at one point. I think it's on page 102 of the game thread or something ridiculous like that. So it is a very active community. We are both on the message board quite a bit, as are the rest of our team of insiders. So this would be, man, we're 5 days to Christmas right now. Just sign yourself up, sign up a loved one, ask someone to sign you up, get a membership. Got a college football playoff game in 11 days. There's going to be a whole lot to talk about. And, everyone is going to be asking all sorts of questions about, so what's going on with this? What's going on with that? And there's lots of stuff that can get talked about on the insiders message board that doesn't necessarily get talked about on Twitter or elsewhere. So that is probably worth your time. So check that out at BuckeyeScoop.com.
Well said, Tom. I have nothing further to add because there's nothing more to add. You said it all, and I co-sign completely. So thank you all for listening. We will talk to you guys tomorrow for the foreseeable future. Have a good one.